Hi, everybody. Welcome to Nurse Chats with Nurse Cheats. And our topic this week is a huge topic. I think it is one that I want to tackle just because it's such a big thing right now, and there are issues all over the world with staffing right now, and I work in a hospital that utilizes ratios, and sometimes it's too much, like the ratios that we have, which are not standardized as of now. It's not law, right? But it is too much. I mean, in our ER, we are a trauma ER, and you could have 2 or 3 ICU patients and a PCU patient at once. We are 1 to 4. We do have people that float, and we do have help usually. Triage is different. So we triage in our ER. We treat in our waiting room, which is an outstanding model. However, they could be 1 to 10. At night, it's a little harder, but it does usually happen that we have somebody floating or somebody that's a trauma nurse. Now, that said, if a trauma comes in, that nurse is going to be with the trauma. There's no help. So, and that happens a lot. So just a little history on the staffing crisis. So California, kind of what's happening is the baby boomers are leaving the job force, right? So they are exiting healthcare. We have an influx of new nurses. They're also leaving healthcare because it sucks, and they're burnt out, and COVID. So a lot of people left because of COVID. And we also have the baby boomers leaving. And a lot of stuff is happening to cause this shortage. So California was the first to pass safe staffing, and that passed in 1999. And this is usually how laws go, right? So usually California passes something, then New York passes something, and then the other states follow along. It's just like the trend. If you can see something pass in California, eventually it's going to make its way across the United States. It's just how I feel. I've noticed the trend. In 2014, Massachusetts enacted it for ICU only, which is a problem, and I'm going to get to why. So California's current ratio is 1 to 1 in operating rooms, 1 to 2 in intensive care, labor and delivery, ICU patients in the ER, neonatal care, 1 to 3 in step down, and 1 to 4 in emergency rooms, postpartum, antepartum, and telemetry units. So it does not say, I'm guessing step down is including med surge. I'm not sure about that. I don't see any ratios for those scenarios. And some of what California has found due to enacting ratios, by the way, is that they have lower patient mortality, lower nurse burnout, lower job dissatisfaction, and better quality of care. Not surprising, right? Like, I feel like that goes without saying. There are a lot of arguments against doing proposed ratios, and I'm going to go through those just to cover both sides. Pennsylvania's proposed ratio. So this is PA House Bill 1500 and Senate Bill 214. Please vote. Call your senators. Would be 1 to 1 in the operating room, trauma ER, active labor, and conscious sedation. Absolutely agree with all of those. Trauma ER, definitely 1 to 1. Conscious sedation, definitely 1 to 1. It is a very high-risk procedure in the ER, and we are absolutely 1 to 1 on conscious sedation. Absolutely 1 to 1. So 1 to 2 would be critical care in the ER, critical care, intensive care, neonatal intensive care, L&D, burn unit, and post-anesthesia. Also agree with that. If you have 2 ICU patients in the ER, I think that's doable. I think where it gets sticky with us right now is we're 1 to 4. So if we have 2 ICU patients, which can happen, they try not to do that to us, but it could happen. You get another PCU patient and a talking patient. It's a lot. And some days it feels undoable. So it would be 1 to 2. In those situations, 1 to 3 in antepartum, emergency room, pediatrics, step down, telemetry. So I do agree with that as well. 1 to 4, med surge, antepartum, psychiatric, other specialty units, pre-surgery, admission units, and ambulatory surgery units. 1 to 5 in rehab or skilled nursing, 1 to 6 in postpartum, that's 3 couplets, or 1 to 2 with immediate postpartum, 1 to 5 in the well baby nursery, and 1 to 4 recently born. So these would be proposed minimums, could be adjusted upwards to account for patient acuity, which probably would not happen very often. We're usually always at 1 to 4, although I have seen our clinical leads adjust somebody's assignment that has a really tough assignment, because the ER is already chaotic. When you add 4 heavy patients on top of the culture in the ER, it's crazy. It is crazy. So here's my question. What is the biggest thing missing in this scenario? What is the biggest thing missing in both of these staffing ratios? What about nursing homes? Are we just forgetting about our elderly? I think we are, right? Hospice is not included in there. Nursing homes are not included. I have seen nursing homes and rehab centers have 40 patients. I've seen it. It exists. That ratio exists in a facility near you. So I get some people don't need that much, but some people really do. Nursing homes are terrible places, and not all of them, a lot of them. I feel like they're also in this thing where they just can't find staff, right? So our nursing homes have no proposed staffing ratios. How do you think that's going to go over with the nursing homes? Oh my gosh, come on, Pennsylvania, let's get it together. I mean, you have to give some relief to these people. I don't care if you make it 1 to 10 or 1 to 15. I can see the issues though. Okay, so these are to be adjusted upwards for acuity, and they don't really keep high acuity patients in a nursing home, which is why if you work at an ER, you shouldn't really get mad that they're sending people out, because they literally do not have the staff to deal with it. Literally. They have the staff barely to change people, and I'm not sure that happens all the time. So Washington State vehemently opposes staffing ratios. It states that it would exacerbate the shortage. I don't agree with that. I think that they're being very short-sighted. What it does do is take the power away from administration to set staffing ratios that are unfair, unjust, and undoable for the staff. I mean, this is why we have so many issues, right? Like, they decide, 1 to 10 is okay. I've literally worked at a hospital that wanted me to take a 9th patient, and I refused. And I don't care. I do not care. I believe in solid patient care, and I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I know how hard that job is. And yeah, so what are we going to do about this? We can't just have some people able to set their own staffing ratios. And this is exactly why, because the nursing homes and facilities that aren't in those little neatly spelled out places are going to set their own ratios, which is going to make those places horrible, which they already are, or more horrible, which I don't think they can afford to be, right? Like, so we got this whole thing going on. All right, so, I think you remember the senator who said, all they do is play cards, and I'm looking her up now. Hold on 1 second. It just astounds me that nurses are the center of so much controversy. So it was Maureen Walsh. I did actually send her cards. So this was back in 2019. She was making remarks on the Senate floor April 16th and said that she wanted to denounce a bill that would allow nurses to get mandatory uninterrupted meal and rest breaks. And she doesn't need to apply to districts like hers with critical access hospitals, which have fewer than 25 beds. And you know what? To be fair, there may be rural hospitals like that where that applies. So, but I think so my problem with her statement, Maureen Walsh's statement at that point, was that she doesn't understand the nursing process and what exactly goes on when you're nursing. And I think that if she did, and she was supposed to study like Shadow One, I don't know if she ever did, but people just lost their minds. And over this whole situation, I know I sent her cards. I was really offended by her comments because her comments were extremely derogatory towards nurses. The same thing happened recently with the stethoscope, right? Like, why do nurses carry a doctor's stethoscope? Are you kidding me? Because we are constantly evaluating people. Constantly. It goes without saying. And, you literally cannot understand a nurse's job unless you do it. Unless you know a nurse, or you've shadowed a nurse, or you have seen what it's really like. And, we criticize nurses and staffing ratios in nursing homes, but let me tell you, I feel bad for every single nurse in a nursing home because I know what they have to deal with. I know what they have to deal with. And it's horrible. And these poor people are getting subpar care in a lot of cases. I see people come in with stage 4 pressure wounds because they can't get to them. They lay around in soiled, diapers, and it's just, oh my gosh. Trying to explain to people that the part of healthcare that is broken is not what you see every day is difficult, right? So these nursing homes have very few techs. They employ, my friend took a day job and she was like a supervisor as her first day. They did that for a reason so that she could observe people, and she's never given meds from a cart. So there was a lot of reasons they did it, but still I know people that are travel nurses that are hired as supervisors in some of these places because they simply have no nurses. And they do not have time to even sit down and eat, let alone play cards. So, I don't know. So I was offended by that. But there are some arguments against it. I don't believe that it'll exacerbate the staffing crisis. I don't believe that. What I do think is the staffing ratios being like that could put smaller hospitals out of business because they often don't have the staff to staff a full hospital. So if they have a lot of patients, I could see that being a problem for small rural hospitals. I could also see the point of the flexibility. However, I wonder how much of that is just not wanting to lose power over that process. And staffing committees, I know everybody's all about the staffing committees, but they don't really work, and they're not really always fair to new nurses coming into the facility. I have seen instances where people are basically bullied, and they get whatever shift they get, and you have to deal with it. That's not fair either. Nursing is extremely tough for everybody, so shouldn't the staffing be fair? So that is the only reason I don't like staffing committees. I don't think they work well in a lot of cases, from what I've seen, but that's just me. These are my feelings on this topic, not really the right feeling. It's just the way I feel about it. So the arguments for safe staffing, safer patient ratios, the safety goes without saying. If you have more time to spend with your patients, you have more time to catch things. Less bad stuff is going to happen if you're able to be in there. There will be less access for people. And honestly, I'm not sure that there shouldn't be less access. I think, given that I work in an ER, I see the worst part of the access to healthcare thing. I have people come in for headaches, take some Tylenol. I have people come in for a fever. I have people with no other symptoms. I have people come in for such simple things that they should be going to their primary care doctor for, and they don't. They go to the ED. So I'm not sure that less access in that case, in the case of the ER, is a bad thing, right? There is a reduced mortality that goes along with increased staffing ratios. Why? Because we can catch things. Because we're there. We're watching them. And I will say, like, there are truly lazy nurses. There are truly bad nurses. But I always wonder how many of those nurses were once like me, were once so excited to be a nurse and so excited to be in this field. And then they were just totally burnt out by the field itself. Like, so before you go judging anybody, think about that, because they probably at one point were very excited to be a nurse. But this is not for, healthcare is not a job career to play with. Like, you need to love your job or just get out, because it is not going to get better. Right? Like, it anytime soon. I hope it gets better eventually. So the patient safety is definitely up there. Reduced mortality up there. Less access. Not totally a bad thing, but that's probably on the arguments against safe staffing, because they want everybody to be seen all the time. Prevent nurses from leaving the bedside. So the job satisfaction question for me, and the preventing people from leaving the bedside, I think is one of the biggest things. You can't just keep burning everybody out. Like, everybody is burnt out. I don't know a nurse that is, like, not burnt out at this point, and that's crazy. Like, this shouldn't be happening, what is happening. And we're getting criminally prosecuted for mistakes, which are regretful and terrible. And, you know, they happen. Hopefully they're not catastrophic usually, but they happen. There's a whole model of thinking along this line. It's called a Swiss cheese model, right? They teach it to you in school, and it's called all these holes line up. So think about this when you think about safety. Okay, you have a patient who has a stroke. You have 4 other patients who have various hypertension, diabetes. Diabetes is a big one, right? If you have somebody with DKA, you're in there every single hour for a long time. So you're running an insulin drip, which constantly requires supervision. DKA is one of the hardest conditions to deal with in the ER. Without a doubt. In my mind, I just do not like dealing with DKA because it's a lot. And you're going to be exhausted. You're going to run constantly, and you're going to be exhausted. If you have an ICU patient on top of a DKA patient, on top of a stroke patient, you have a lot of things that go on. So you have this stroke patient, new stroke, maybe still stroking, right? Still having signs and symptoms, maybe outside the 4-hour window. And you are in the room with the diabetes patient, and they start having stroke symptoms, but you're with the diabetes patient for 20 minutes because you have to give them insulin, because that is the critical task at that point, and you don't know what's going on with the other patient because you have so many patients that you literally can't be everywhere at once. See how that hole starts to like line up with the hole beneath it? So we can't do safe staffing. Therefore, we can't see every patient in time. Therefore, we can't do this. And the holes start to line up and things start to fall through. It is not that the care is any less stellar than it was before. It is just that you have critical patients. So you have to find a way to manage. And this is the other thing that new nurses tend to need to work on a lot, is asking for help. Oh my gosh. If I had any idea, and I'm an older nurse, like I started late, and I've been in the healthcare industry for about 3 years, right? As a nurse, I graduated from Monco. And I am good at asking questions. I am good at seeking help when I need it. You know what I sucked at when I started at the ER I work at now? Asking for help. I don't know what in my head made me think that I was going to be okay. Because you're not always okay. And the charge nurses will tell you, they have people call them all the time for help. The one thing I will say to new nurses is, if you need help, do not call your charge nurse and just say, I need help. Call your charge nurse and have a list of tasks ready. Ask if somebody can medicate room 3. Ask if somebody can help change room 4. Because you have a stroke patient that's now stroking out, or you're in unconscious sedation, or any number of things. But there are ways to organize yourself against these things that happen in the ER, and it's something you learn as you go. I definitely sucked at it. When I first started in my current ER, I was in the closet like all the time. Oh, the closet stories, the bedroom stories, right? It should be a drama show. I'm not even kidding you. Some of the stuff that goes on in the medicine closet is crazy, but it's the truth. So this Swiss cheese model is applicable to the staffing crisis and the staffing shortages because those holes line up, right? It's not that you're trying to ignore people. It is that you can't help it. And you can't get to everything. So nurses are always critically thinking. Well, hopefully they are. Maybe they're not always critically thinking, but they should be. So if you have a patient, we're going to use our scenario, right? We have DKA, we have an ankle sprain, a stroke patient, and what else? DKA, stroke, ankle, and a headache. We'll just say we have 2. No, we'll say respiratory distress. Okay, but they're stable. The respiratory distress is stable. Okay? So you have these 4 patients. And you can't possibly round on all of them, right? So you have to think who's your most critical patient. So the respiratory distress is stabilized, right? She is on oxygen or BiPAP. She is breathing fine on it. She's not fighting it. She's doing much better, feeling better. So she is that critical. I know she sounds critical, but she's fine. She needs to be monitored, but she's stable right now. Vital signs are all good, right? You have the ankle sprain. That's nothing, right? Like they're going to be okay. If you leave them for a few minutes, they'll be fine. But now you have this stroke patient, you have this DKA patient. So let's say the stroke is within the 4 hours and you have to administer TPA, which, by the way, get our TPA badge buddy because it has all the stuff you need to know about giving that drug, right? So you have a TPA and you have an insulin drip. Both of these, well, TPA is actually a 1-to-1 administration anyway. But let's say the staffing ratios at your hospital are what they are, and you can have 2 ICU patients. Okay, so we have 1 to 2 critical care of the ER. You have a DKA and a stroke patient. That is a crazy assignment. You cannot possibly be in both places at the same time. And I am going to tell you, you are probably going to spend half an hour in the ICU in the stroke patient, half an hour in the DKA. Like, you're just going to be running back and forth all night because these 2 patients are super critical. And they have drugs that are extremely dangerous that have to be monitored. So there's your staffing ratio, right? Now, is it safer to have 1 to 2 in that instance? Absolutely, right? You want to be 1 to 2. I'd actually rather be 1 to 1. And in our ER, if they have a TPA administration, they usually have somebody watch that patient because you literally can't leave the room. So if you have a DKA patient, somebody's got to be watching the DKA patient. So it is a very critical thing, the staffing ratio. Now imagine at the 1 to 4 that they have, and having to do those 2 patients. It's impossible. It's close to impossible. It's done all the time, but it shouldn't be. So that is my diatribe on why staffing ratios are so important, because you just don't know what you're getting. And you could have, let's use med-surg, for example, okay, for all my med-surg nurses out there, right? You have a 5-patient assignment, and one of them, I don't know if they do insulin drips. I don't think med-surg does insulin drips, but they definitely have some high care patients. What if you have a full care? 5 of them are full care. Let's just say every person in your assignment requires full care. Do you know what that's like when you don't have a tech? It is insane. Because you're trying to roll people that just can't or are not mentally there and cannot roll themselves. So, the 1 to 4, I think that's a good thing for med-surg units, 1 to 4. That will definitely help them. And yes, they're lower acuity, but that doesn't mean they're non-acuity. They still have many, many sicknesses and diseases to deal with. So, staffing ratios, in my opinion, absolutely should be mandatory. I don't understand everybody's arguments against them. However, we need to change this. We need to change our narrative in healthcare, because it is just going to get worse. And you can mark my words on it. It is going to get worse if we do not start dealing with this in reality and not just keep excusing it away and blaming the nurses for what is going on in healthcare. It is not the nurse's fault. It is not the doctor's fault, and it is not the PA's fault or the respiratory therapist or the poor CNAs. Dude, I love my techs, and let me tell you, the stuff they have to put up with is unbelievable. I have never seen people treated the way that I have seen techs treated. Stop it. It's not okay. It's not okay. And pay them more, because they deserve a raise more than anybody else in healthcare. CNAs deserve a raise. Maybe except for the nurses making like $26 an hour, which I don't even get. But I know it happens. So that's my topic this week on safer staffing, and I hope that made sense. Drop your comments, what you think. Do you believe in safe staffing? Do you not believe? Do you think Pennsylvania did a good job drafting their ratios, which I will put in the comments below? Let me know what you think, because I think this is a huge topic, and I think we need to start standing up for ourselves. It needs to happen. Anyway, that's it for me, everybody. I am out of here. That is Nurse Chats for this week. Tune in next week, where we will have an all-new news segment, true crime segment, and topic. I'm out of here. Bye.